Aloha, I'm Josh Green, here, your host for Healthcare in Hawaii. Today I'm going to be focusing on an important issue in our state, drunk driving. I have two excellent guests who I'm going to introduce in a moment, but first I wanted to preface our show by saying we've had many healthcare leaders over the last 3 months to discuss healthcare reform, Obamacare, the state of our healthcare hospital system, clinics, but so many of our problems are actually health mediated, and drunk driving is one of the most severe that I see as an emergency room physician on the Big Island. You know, I'm a senator and I work at the Capitol on policy matters, but few issues have been as compelling and gut-wrenching as this issue for me. When I see people in the emergency department because they've been tragically involved in a car crash, it's almost always involving alcohol or drugs in some manner. Today we have two experts in Arkie Koehl and Carol McNamee to tell us all about the drunk driving problem here in Paradise, and that's why we've titled our show as such. I'd like to first introduce my guests, Arkie Koehl and Carol, and have them tell us a little bit about themselves. Arkie?
Thanks, Josh. This is a great pleasure and break for us to be able to address a larger audience. So thanks very much for this opportunity. I'm a retired advertising executive. Started out in Madison Avenue, worked in Asia, Latin America, California, and Hawaii. In advertising, when I retired, I became a volunteer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That's my main activity in retirement because I believe very strongly in what we're doing.
Thank you, Arkie. Carol, tell us about yourself.
Well, I was born just a few years ago in Cleveland, Ohio, actually. And then eventually, after I graduated from high school, I moved out to California, went to college there, met my husband there, and then we came to Hawaii. We actually fell in love with Hawaii on our honeymoon, and we pledged to get back. And so we had a few short trips, and then in 1971, we became full-time civilian residents, and I became a full-time volunteer and participated in a number of organizations, including the auxiliary to the Hawaii Medical Association, and I say that because we're going to get back to that shortly. And then in 1982-83 became very involved in getting MAD started, and I'm known as the founder of MAD in Hawaii.
So it's so fascinating to me, two people that have come to the state and made this kind of one of their passionate pieces of their lives. We were discussing this earlier, that as many as 50 people die every year from a crash that involves alcohol. Every 51 minutes, I believe you were saying to me, Arkie, earlier, that someone in our country dies because of drunk driving crash. And it's over 10,000 people now every year that we lose at the hands of a drunk driver. What made you two personally involved? Neither of your careers were based on, I guess, public safety or alcohol-related issues. Why did you guys get involved?
Why don't you go first, because you have more.
Because I have the longest story.
Okay, give us the highlights, Carol.
Well, as I mentioned to you, in the late 70s, early 80s, I was involved in the Hawaii Medical Association auxiliary because my husband is also a physician. In addition to being involved in that, my husband had two severe crashes that absolutely totaled his vehicle, and luckily he came out somewhat injured but okay. And in my heart, I thought, if there is ever a third incident, I'm afraid it's not going to be so lucky. So that was always playing in my mind. And one time when I was president of the medical auxiliary, I had to go to Hilo. And we had a presentation from a man, a doctor who was a psychiatrist with Department of Health in Hilo. And he told this really sad, compelling story about being in a crash with his wife in the passenger seat and his little 2-year-old boy in the back seat. And a car came speeding out of nowhere and broadsided them. His wife died in his arms on the highway, and I'll never forget his words. He said, "I never ever got to say goodbye." And his son was ejected out of the hatchback smashed onto the pavement, barely survived, and went through, I can't tell you how many surgeries at age 2 and 3, and has survived, obviously. But that was such a story that I never thought about. I never knew about drunk driving. And so we as an auxiliary decided to get involved with the issue, and we discussed for months what to do about it. And finally, we decided we were going to go with this new organization that had just been founded in California in 1980. This was, we're talking now about last part of 1982, 83. And we said, let's start MAD in Hawaii. I won't go into the details of how we did that, but in February of 1984, we were formally chartered, and the person who founded the national organization came to Hawaii, made a trip through all the islands, big conference in Honolulu, chartered each of the islands except for Kauai, which came later, and we were off and running. No money, but a lot of heart and a lot of determination to make a difference.
And your determination is one of the many reasons I've asked you to come today, because I've over the years been able to see you as a policymaker make all the difference. And I don't think legislation would ever pass here in the state of Hawaii without the two of you. So that's why you're here today, and you know, your incredible devotion makes all the difference. Arkie, what got you interested in MAD?
Nowhere near as dramatic as that. I'm a communications professional, a marketing guy, and I knew that once I retired, which I did in 2004, I would want to give back to the community, as the saying is, and if it was something where my ability to influence public behavior, which is what advertising does,
right,
could be deployed, that would be ideal. And I think getting at drunk driving, getting at bad, risky, fatal behaviors is something that's worthy of mass communication tools.
I'm so pleased to see that that's another reason for people to get involved, because there should be so many reasons. It shouldn't just be tragedy that befalls one of our family members or friends,
that's
but I've had a lot of education from you, two good people over the years, and you've led me to understand that as many as 1 in 3 people in their lifetime will be affected by a drunk driving crash, right?
That's correct.
And that just means that, it's very likely to, it affected one of the 3 of us, and already, and you, Carol. And in the weekend calls that I do in the emergency department over the years, it doesn't fail that, every couple months there's some tragic collision that I take care of people. And like I said earlier, without exception, in my experience, there's some form of abuse going on, whether it's alcohol or drugs or just a situation that's gotten out of control, and it can hit any one of us at any time, which is why I wanted to bring this subject up.
And that's what I want to let people know and think about. It's capricious, and no one is exempt. You could be the best driver in the world. You could have the most beautiful family who does everything right. You could think, I'm immune from anything bad happening to me. You can be just sitting at a stoplight, doing the right thing, waiting for the light to change, and bam, someone can hit you from behind, which happened to one of our legislators, actually, and your life changes forever. Maybe if you're lucky, your car just gets smashed. But maybe you get injured, maybe your family gets injured or killed, or you get killed. You don't know from minute to minute. And, there's certain hours that are riskier, and that's why my husband was, for a time, an obstetrician gynecologist.
Yes.
And so he got hit after he had gone to do a delivery in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. He's coming home on the highway and gets it from the back.
That's testament, I think.
Nobody's on the road except the doctors and the people who have been in the bars or in Waikiki having a good time. And that's a bad combination.
Yes.
So that's why I keep telling the doctors, you have an interest, a special interest.
Yeah, exhausted
in being
physicians
involved.
on the road with drunk drivers is not a great combination.
It isn't.
I think that we should give people a few statistics. before we go into our first break, and then we can begin to frame in our second 15 minutes what the mission of MAD is. But I guess in Hawaii and across the country, I think for the most part, the legal limit is 0.08. That's
Yes.
blood alcohol, right?
Yes,
but that doesn't
that's
mean
correct.
that a level lower than that is safe. Is that correct?
That is absolutely right. In fact, it's the AMA way back in the early 70s who came out with a report that people still quote to this day, that impairment begins with the first drink, and some measurable impairment begins at a 0.05, and absolutely measurable impairment of most skills needed for driving, almost all skills needed for driving, is definite at 0.08. And we had for many years 0.10, not only in this state, but many states across the country. We had a jumble of different numbers. And that is way out there. That's where there's a graph.
Yes.
Of, down here is 0 to 0.05. It begins a little at 0.05. By 0.08, it starts going really up. And 0.10 is getting way up there.
That's when
as
people
far
start
as
having
risk.
bad crashes and risks.
Really high risk. And then once you get up to 0.15 and above, it's considered very high risk.
And across the country, there's been a movement to make stronger laws for people both that are drunk drivers and also at the very extreme levels. Is that correct? That's a more challenging question, I guess, because there are laws all across the spectrum, right?
Everybody now has 0.08.
Okay.
Every state, in every state in the nation, it's illegal to drive at 0.08. Now, if we go outside of the U.S. and we look around the world,
Yes.
There's a lot of 0.05s, and many countries have a 0.02 or zero tolerance. A lot of the former Eastern Bloc countries, Sweden is always talked about as having a 0.02. Some of the Far Eastern countries, Japan has something like a 0.02, I think. Is that right, Arkie?
I don't remember.
But even with a 0.08, we're still one of the higher nations in the world with a higher BAC than many.
And that's BAC meaning blood alcohol.
Blood alcohol concentration.
Right. Well, I think this is a pretty good place to take a first break, but I just wanted to say that our message today as a threesome, I think, is please never drink and drive. We want to get into the details of drunk driving. We want to get into the details of the tragedies that occur on the road and what's happening to solve the problem. But again, I'm Josh Green, your host today at Healthcare in Hawaii with Arkie Koehl, Carol McNamee from MAD. We're so glad you joined us today. Thank you.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions. I'm Nicole Hori. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
Aloha. Welcome back to Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm your host, Josh Green, State Senator and Emergency Room Physician. Today I'm honored to discuss a different kind of issue, not about healthcare transformation or about our healthcare system, but an actual challenge we have in society, and that's drunk driving. Today's title and topic is Drunk Driving in Paradise. I'm joined by Arkie Koehl and Carol McNamee of MAD. Last year, over 10,000 people lost their lives as a result of drunk driving. It's really a tragedy, and I wanted to really explore the scope of this problem here in the state of Hawaii. I first wanted, though, to go back to Arkie Koehl and find out what happened when MAD was formed. So, Arkie, give us a little bit of a history since the formation of the organization.
It's very interesting. First of all, let me say that you don't have to be a mother to volunteer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I didn't mention that before. There are plenty of men involved. when MAD got started in 1980, as Carol was saying before, I don't know how many drunk driving crashes, let's say well over 25,000.
28, when we started, 28,000 deaths.
28,000.
Wow.
Because of MAD's efforts and the efforts of state legislatures, the growing public awareness of the crime of drunk driving, because it is a violent crime, it is treated by the law as a violent crime, and it's the most widely committed violent crime in the United States, if not the world. Awareness, tougher laws, more community action, and some really good work by legislators. Because of that effort, there was a severe drop over the next 20 years, from 1980 to around 2000. Traffic crash deaths caused by drunk driving dropped in half.
Wow.
And unfortunately, and to our surprise and disappointment, a little over 10 years ago, that number started holding steady. And it's very hard to figure out. MAD on a national basis says that it's the people who are still driving, the people who didn't get the message, the people who don't listen, the people who aren't paying attention to the laws, the penalties, the consequences, the people who don't care if they ruin somebody else's life, cause another family a loss, etc. Those people we define as people who drink and drive because they can. And in 2007, Mothers Against Drunk Driving launched a nationwide campaign called the Campaign to Eliminate Drunk Driving. And it involves several different facets, possibly the most interesting and unique of which is the use of technology. Drunk driving, unlike a lot of other crimes, lends itself to technology, and more as the years go by, we will be able to do things like install in-car breathalyzers in people's cars when they've offended, so that they can't do it again for a period of time. They're revoked. We can talk about that if you wish later.
Yes.
But that's technology. And sooner or later, 20 years from now, there will be cars built where you don't have to blow into something like this to prove you're sober. All you do is touch the steering wheel. All you do is press the touchpad, and it'll instantly know whether the car will start or not start. So technology says that yes, someday we can actually eliminate drunk driving.
So biometrics is in the future for us.
Absolutely.
And it's in the near future, actually, because Congress for several years has appropriated, I don't remember how many $1 million to a program of research on exactly what Arkie is talking about. It's called
DADSS.org. You go to DADSS.org.
If only I could remember what it stands for, but it's alcohol detection, alcohol detection safety program, something like that. But it is this work by a number of different car companies and other people in highway safety, including MAD. MAD is part of the group that's investigating this. And what we hear from Washington is it's the real deal. We are going to see cars outfitted with, as Arkie said, some system to prevent the car from starting. And the system will be built into the car right from the get-go. It's not something you have to add on. It's going to be manufactured. So you'll buy a car off the showroom floor and drive it away only if you're sober.
That sounds very good to me, and I hope that we can incorporate that kind of technology into all vehicles, so that it's not a judgment on people's character or anything else. Though I do judge. I'll be candid on this matter. When I see someone who has perpetrated the crime of killing another when they've been a drunk driver, I do hold them in great contempt. And I think we all mourn for the victims, but it also affects the families of those whose loved one committed the crime. They lose that person from their life as well. But it would be wonderful to see all cars fitted for the purposes of decreasing these deaths. Because to again reframe the issue, back when MAD started, 28,000 fatalities a year, down to around 10,000 now per year. But if we could save another 5,000, split that in half, or drive it down to near zero, can you imagine? Because I think every car crash in my experience, affects an entire community.
Absolutely.
Oh,
We
big
lose a
ripple
teenager, we lose a loved one. The whole, like in Hawaii, we mourn as communities. And is that what you've seen here in the state?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, that's why MAD started out with a two-part mission.
Yes.
And that was to stop drunk driving.
Why don't you go right from the top? Why don't you tell us what the mission of MAD is? I didn't.
This is what I'm starting to do.
Yes.
It's now it's three-pronged, but when we started, it was just two: to stop drunk driving and to support the victims of this violent crime.
Yes.
And now we added on, and to prevent underage drinking, because we know this is where it all begins. Teenage drinkers grow up to be adult drinkers and drinkers who drive, unfortunately. So we're trying to get really at the root of the problem with education of young people, but also, as I said, for that second part of the program of the mission, it is to give support and aid and counseling and information to victims. To the families of victims of drunk drivers, or to injured victims themselves.
Great.
And that includes things like court accompaniment too, and going through the criminal justice system and trying to figure that one out.
I was about to ask you about that. So give us an idea of the practical things that MAD does in the course of a year. What are the kind of programs that MAD likes to participate in? How can people engage MAD if that's something they'd like to do? What would you advise?
Well, of course, one of our biggest programs, Arkie has just been talking about, and that's our legislative program. And although the core of that is done by just a few volunteers, there are times when we need a lot of other people to help get the word out about a big push for something. So we can use a lot of people in that aspect. And then for the underage drinking part, we need a lot of people to help with that, because we have a couple of programs. One is called The Power of Parents,
Yes.
and the other is The Power of Youth. And what we need to do is train people about how to talk to their teens about alcohol. It makes a big difference. So we'd like to train facilitators to go out and about and spread the word all over the state, every county, every nook and cranny, and get the word out about the importance of just not saying, oh, it's just something that happens, that kids will drink and that's the way they are. No, let's talk about alcohol and the repercussions and the consequences that these kids are going to suffer if they do drink, and then possibly drink and drive as well. So we need lots of volunteers for that. And now that you're talking about
Please. Yes.
the holiday season coming up, which is a very high-risk time for drinking and driving. Many parties, as we all know, starting right about now and going through New Year's Day. So MAD for many, many years. I mean, this happened, I think, in the early 80s. A red ribbon. It used to be Red Ribbon Campaign. Now we call it TOOFs. Tie one on for safety.
Yes.
And you tie this onto your antenna, if you have one, or your door handle, or any part of your vehicle, as your pledge that you will not drink and drive or take drugs and drive during this holiday season, and you will be safe and you will buckle up. And so every time you see one of these on a vehicle, it reminds you. If it's not on your vehicle, you see someone else with a red ribbon dangling off their car, you think, oh yeah, that's my reminder. Don't get behind the wheel if I'm going to a party and I think I'm going to be drinking alcohol. Get a designated driver ahead of time, or plan to take a cab, or take your pillow and stay over. And if you're a host, watch what you're serving, and lots of food and not so much alcohol.
And you can pick these up at all sorts of retail establishments like 7-Eleven.
Is it, just so I can understand, what have you found has been most effective? Is it literacy and education on the matter that's been effective in bringing down the fatalities as a result of drunk driving? Is it the fact that we have technology? Well, what's made the biggest difference from the perspective of people who've been involved in this issue for so long?
To the communications guy here.
No, I think that the first thing you mentioned, the awareness, people that were capable of getting the message got the message, and the rate cut in half.
Okay.
Was cut in half. That left the half of the people who have not got the message are not, in my opinion, my very cynical opinion, they're not about to get the message. That's why we're developing technology for them. Now, like you, I have nothing but contempt for these people. This is the sort of the stupid core. They're not going to get it that way. And so it's got to be through law enforcement, and the courts that we get tough on these people. And that's why legislators such as yourself, who was such a help to us in getting through the Ignition Interlock program, which began in 2011, are absolutely vital to this. We just have to keep, until the day comes, 20 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, when you can't start a car unless you're sober. Until that day comes, we need you, we need the police, we need the lawyers, we need everybody to get together and bring and lower the boom on these people.
Do we have enough law enforcement available to us for this problem, or is that something that we also have to work on?
More is always better.
Okay.
I mean, I think they do a great job, but the ranks are always thin, and they work hard and long hours. And you know, if we had a few extra people in the DUI teams on all islands, that would do nothing but help get more drunk drivers off the road.
Let me say that I know that I'm saying this because I know that none of your viewers are part of this stupid core. So I can say this safely. Your chances of getting caught driving drunk are very slim. Even with a lot of cops out there, with a lot of checkpoints, a lot of roadblocks, your chances are, the statistics, the national statistics, are that people have to drive an average of 87 times drunk before they get caught for their first time.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's why we say there's really no such thing as a first offender.
Right.
It's a first getting caughter.
Right.
My gosh. Well, I think this is a pretty good place to take our next break. I'll just reiterate, our message tonight is drive safely, never drive when you've had something to drink. Many people are out there driving drunk, so be very careful. Spread the word, because 1 in 3 of us will be a part of a family or a cohort or with friends that will be victims to this terrible crime, which is a victim of a drunk driving collision. Over 10,000 people die every year, and over 50 people can die in the state of Hawaii. So this is a critical issue that we're taking up. In our next segment here on Healthcare in Hawaii, the next 15 minutes, we're going to talk about legislation, the technology that can be implemented to stop drunk driving, and then we'll move on to our vision for the future. Again, I'm Josh Green, your host, emergency room physician and state policymaker. Thanks for joining us.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaiian Foreign Trade Zone, number 9, has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBED, the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program. It does so to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. Mahalo.
Aloha, welcome back to Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm your host, Josh Green, State Senator and Emergency Room Physician. Today we're talking about drunk driving in paradise. Historically, Hawaii is ranked amongst the worst states as far as offenders go for drunk driving, for fatalities associated with drunk driving by a percentage, and the tragedy that accompanies all of this. So today I have 2 excellent guests, Arkie Koehl, Carol McNamee, who are telling us about what it's like in the state of Hawaii, why the tragedy exists here, and what we're doing about it. So let me again go to you, Arkie. Give us again the perspective of the problem here in the state.
Well, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and it's shameful that in my memory, the last 7 or 8 years, Hawaii scores in the national statistics. Every year, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration issues statistics state by state on traffic fatalities and on what % of those traffic fatalities involved alcohol. And that percent, they rank the states on that percent. And every year of these last 7 or 8 years that I can remember, Hawaii has been in the bottom 5 states, the worst 5 in terms of the large percent of our fatal traffic crashes which were caused by alcohol. In at least 2 of those years, we were the worst state by far. In 2010, I think we were the worst state, or 2011.
And I know that in one of the years when I had first been elected, and I was interested in these kind of issues, interested in issues that related to drug use, drug addiction, the crystal meth problem, but then drunk driving. And then Carol McNamee, who founded MAD, she's been able to see this for this now really good stretch of time, for 40 years. And has this been your experience?
No, 30.
30 or something. Sorry, I've aged you. I'm sorry, Carol.
No. Well, that's actually over 30, so I'll give you that.
So for 30 years, you've seen also what Arkie has described, which is just worse numbers. We had, I think it was 57% of all the crashes on Big Island that resulted in fatalities were alcohol related.
Yes.
in one of I think 2 or 3 years ago. So
it used to be over 60.
60%.
Yes.
So that brings us to the point now. MAD has now become an advocate for those who have suffered these tragedies, and has now become actually a legislative force at state capitals around the country. Why don't we dive right in and talk about what is going on legislatively to decrease the number of tragic fatalities from drunk driving? You've held this thing up a couple times, Arkie. Tell us what this device is.
Very briefly, the ignition interlock device, which we call the in-car breathalyzer, is a device that gets a little plastic mouthpiece. I have it here. It'd take too long to set up. It is a device which, once you are arrested for drunk driving, as soon as you are arrested, you've got 15 days to put one of these on your car if you wish to drive. Before we had this, your license was taken away and you couldn't drive for a period of time, depending on whether it was your first, second, or third offense or more. Okay?
Yes.
Now you get one of these devices put on at your own expense, and you can drive by proving to the device that you got no alcohol on your breath.
And if you do have alcohol in your breath, what happens?
If you do have alcohol in your breath, the car won't start.
Okay.
This is hardwired under your dashboard, hardwired into your ignition system, and there's a little computer that keeps the record of everything that you've tried to do. In 2012, last year, there were 13,652 failed attempts to start a car in the state of Hawaii by some 1,500, 1,600 people with this device installed. That's how many times. That's how they didn't get the idea. The bad news is they didn't get the idea. They're still trying to start their car. The good news is they didn't go out and kill anybody because the car wouldn't start.
They didn't get out of the carport.
And that's fatalities that were averted, perhaps.
Yes, maybe, yeah.
So let me understand this device better for people out there that are watching us. So you've been arrested for drunk driving. You might be awaiting your trial. You might be awaiting a plea deal. What have you? This in 15 days you put this thing in your car, and is it any alcohol at all, or is it if you're above the blood alcohol level that's allowable for driving?
It's any alcohol at all. It's set at 0.02, but that's the lowest sensitivity you can get it without getting a defense lawyer to make trouble.
So we've already established that the average drunk driver drives 87 times before they're arrested for this. So we know that people are out on the road driving and driving and driving in spite of drinking, and sometimes having near misses. I know that on the Big Island, the light is bad, the drives are long, there's large stretches of highway where people are driving and unfortunately drunk driving, and the potential for collisions is very high. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we have had a large number of traffic fatalities on the Big Island in general. But now you have this thing in your car. The court system has said you have to put in, how long does it stay in your car?
On the first offense, it stays in for 12 months.
Okay.
Second offense, 18 months. Third offense, 24 months.
Yes.
And after that, you go into a different category, what we call habitual offenders.
Right.
Which is a whole other criminal category. That's a felony category.
Okay.
But this lines up with the amount of time your license is revoked.
Okay.
So your license is taken away. Your plastic license is taken away at the time of arrest.
Yes.
And then you get a little temporary permit so that you can drive for actually 30 days. And then you get a notice that your arrest has been looked at and everything is good. And so that license is really going to be gone. So that's your chance to go get the interlock, as Arkie was saying. And before your license is really gone, get that hooked up. You get a special permit.
Yes.
And then you're good to go. You're legal to drive as long as this is installed in your vehicle and you're using it properly.
What happens if, I so appreciate that. So what happens if someone has been arrested? We know that they're a drunk driver. We want them to get better because we do acknowledge
That's
that
right.
some people, they have this illness of alcoholism,
That's
and we all
correct.
recognize and are sympathetic, but we're not sympathetic to killing innocent people. So we recognize someone's got a problem, they've been busted, which I think is a good thing.
Yes.
So it's an awakening, it's a wake-up call, right? They have the interlock device placed on their car, but what if their family has 2 cars? What happens then? Can they, obviously they're not allowed to drive a different car, so
No.
how does that play out?
What their permit actually says is the holder of this permit is only allowed to drive a car that is equipped with an ignition interlock device.
Okay.
So he could drive your car if you've got one of these in your car. He could drive your car.
Okay.
If he's only got 1 car in the family, he's got 4 drivers in the family. They've all got to come in to the installation center and be trained in the use of this device. And unfortunately for them, they're going to have to suffer blow into this thing because the old man got busted for drunk driving.
Got it.
And that's
Yeah.
just something you ought to think about before you drive drunk.
And as you said, if there's more than 1 car in the family and the offender may be driving 2 different cars, then he better get 2 interlocks.
Because if not, and you drive a different car when you've been an offender, then what happens to you? If you, in other words, you drive a car without the interlock and you get caught again.
Then you're in the same category as a person who got arrested for driving without a license. Well, a person who got arrested for driving when a license had been revoked for drunk driving. That's a very, very serious offense. You go to jail. It's not strong enough. And one of the things we've got to work on is tightening that so that more people get the interlock, more people think twice before they drive unlicensed.
So we may be trying to do that this year, actually, is
in the legislature.
increase the sanctions a bit on this driving on a revoked license charge.
Because we're trying to close the loophole that people may utilize to get around this device, which works, right?
Yeah.
You said again, let's come back to that number. You said how many times did people try to start their car last year?
13,652. I just got the figures.
And I'm so pleased because that's 13,632
Potential disasters avoided.
Right, and I have 2 children at home that are, strapped up in their children's seats in the back of my car, and I've got a young wife, and I just can't really imagine what I would do if, God forbid, someone plowed into them, and even worse still if they had been already caught, we were trying to intervene, and they got around the law. So tell me, is it working? Are we seeing a decrease? Are we expecting to see a decrease in fatalities in the state of Hawaii?
We're praying for that. There's some states, virtually every state in the union has some kind of, is working on interlock or has it, some more successful than others. Here's a
Who is this
lovely
person?
girl.
This is
Aaliyah
Aaliyah Braden, Big Island, was killed by a drunk driver. I don't remember the year now. A few years ago.
Yes.
And her mother was severely injured. I mean, could not walk, could not hold a job. Father was absolutely devastated. I mean, he really has had a hard time.
Yes.
There's now actually a law named after her on the Big Island, just on the Big Island, Aaliyah's Law, that has to do with towing a vehicle that's been
Yes.
involved in a drunk driving arrest, I guess. So, she's not the only child. I just happen to have her photograph with me. But the horrible thing, as you were just saying, Josh, is there are too many families that get hit, and children lost, teenagers who drink and drive, and there can be a whole car full of teenagers killed or injured or both.
Yeah, I think this underscores all of the messages that we're talking about today, that to lose one child like Aaliyah is just unbelievable. But I did witness what it impact it had on the entire family and community, because it's back in my community, back in Kona, and it's one of the reasons that we're taking this issue up ahead of issues like heart failure, ahead of issues like diabetes. I wanted to talk about drunk driving because it's something that we can actually prevent. And so Arkie was saying the potential to save lives is?
Yeah, I say we don't have it's a fairly new technology. We don't have the hard numbers yet from the nationally yet to say that for sure that lives are being saved. We know that driving miles are being cut, etc. I want to say very quickly that nobody out there should think that blowing at it is all you have to do, because there are all sorts of safeguards. There's a camera that takes a picture of you when you blow to make sure that you're not blowing from me. There's a test you have to take while you're driving. It comes on and says pull over and blow again to make sure you didn't stop in a pub and tank up and then leave the motor running. There's all sorts of safeguards.
Let me ask you something out of the box, Arkie and Carol. If someone out there is watching our show and knows that they have an alcohol problem, and they don't want to wait till that moment when they get picked up by law enforcement, is this something that they can reach out and buy for themselves, that or a family member, a loving wife that has a husband that has an alcohol problem, can they go out and install one of these in their car? Should we be legislating and appropriating some money to make it available to people maybe who are in poverty but would like to preemptively put that safeguard in their own lives so that they don't become a perpetrator of a crime against an innocent family?
And theoretically it can, but I don't think we are set up
to
do that, or we can do that.
The vendor who the state approved, they're called Smart Start, and they have installation locations in every county. They even have one on Lanai where there are 7 devices installed. I couldn't believe that.
But only one on Molokai.
Right, only one on Molokai. They have maybe, I don't know, a dozen times in the last 2 years been approached and sold the device to people whose kid was going away to college on another island, or to somebody who said, I don't trust myself. So yes, anybody can get one of these things.
It's a great supporter of sobriety. Say someone has gone through a treatment program. But then after they get out, they want to drive their vehicle, and if they have one of these attached, they know every day, if I'm going to drive to work or school or do what I have to do, I've got to be sober. So that's a great thing to wake up and know.
Yeah, I would tell you what, before we go into our final break for the show, I would be so proud of people if they would reach out to their loved ones and buy one of these devices. If they call us, we'll find grants for them to put them in their cars. We will work with people to make that happen. And maybe we'll even entertain ideas about putting a sticker saying, I'm supporting a friend, or I've taken a step in early before I caused harm to some family, and we'll reward them. We'll celebrate them for taking.
That's fantastic.
So why don't we take that up in the
wonderful.
future? We'll take our break, and then we're going to come back for your vision for the future and how we can stop drunk driving in paradise. Okay?
Thanks, Jeff.
So again, I'm Josh Green, your host at Healthcare in Hawaii, here with Arkie Koehl, Carol McNamee, working with MAD.
Aloha, my name is Dan Bauer, and I'm the General Manager of the Plaza Club. The Plaza Club is Honolulu's premier business club. We're located in the heart of the financial district on historic Fort Street Mall. On the 20th and 21st floors atop the Pioneer Plaza, our commanding skyline views, along with our award-winning cuisine and service, are known as the place to do business downtown. We offer professional as well as social events and programs to our members and their guests, all tailored to enrich their professional and personal lives and to give them the cutting edge that they deserve in business. Why don't you consider becoming a member of the club? Call me at 531-7788 or come see me and let's talk business and how the Plaza Club can work for you. Again, my name is Dan Bauer. I'm the General Manager of the club, and I'm here for you.
Welcome back to Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm Josh Green, your host, emergency room physician and state policy maker on healthcare matters predominantly. Today we're talking about drunk driving in paradise, and I'm joined by 2 leaders fighting this problem from Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Arkie Koehl and Carol McNamee. We've established that it's a crisis in our country. Over 10,000 people lose their lives every year as a result of drunk driving. In Hawaii, far too many people die on our roads. More than 50 a year can die because of drunk driving and drug-related driving. This is a problem that we can prevent as a community. In our first couple segments, we've talked about the scope of the problem, we've talked about MAD's involvement in our state, and we've talked about legislation that's put basically technology into our lives, into the cars of those who are drunk drivers, to help stop that from becoming a problem. Over the years, we've seen a precipitous decline in fatalities as a result of drunk driving, but that flat line flattened out, and now we're still seeing far too many deaths, according to Arkie. In our last few minutes, I want to turn to my guests and ask what's their vision for the future? What can be done? How can we as a community help stop this problem? So let me turn to you guys. Carol, you're an expert. You've been here for more than 3 decades working on this critical problem.
Right.
What should we do in the future?
Well, as Arkie has mentioned, I think that technology is going to help us a great deal, but this is going to be in the future, and I think that this is really an issue of personal responsibility. I'm sure all your viewers have gone out and they have bought a vehicle and they feel so great about that. But not only do they have to take care of the vehicle, they have to take care of themselves and their loved ones and innocent people on the road. And every time they get into the vehicle, they need to think, have I been drinking or am I sober? Am I okay to drive this vehicle and not cause terrible tragedies? And it's so hard to get this message across. We have a drinking culture in this state, and that's fine, but the alternatives are out there, and I think everybody just has to think about what could happen. And believe me, if they think about, well, maybe I'll just get a DUI. A DUI can cost you thousands of dollars. And when we look at nationwide, drunk driving costs $132 billion every year to society in America. That is outrageous. So, we have all this big health push. We talk about a lot of things. Oh, we're going to jog. We're going to, we're going to eat our vegetables. We're going to stop smoking. Not too many people are talking about alcohol. It's a big one. Having a little alcohol in the evening, great, but don't get in your car. And I've said this so many times, and I don't know how to say it any differently. But last thing I will say is that if you want to get something in your heart about why you shouldn't have those extra drinks and go out and drive, go down to Kaka'ako Waterfront Park on the very end, where we have a memorial, a victims memorial, that is very touching, done by local artist John Koga. And it's a family of 3 people in bronze, and it's a tall structure. Each of the family members has a big hole right here where their heart was. And we don't want any more holes in any hearts.
I think the message is taken to heart here today. Arkie, do you want to say anything else to our viewers before we wrap up today?
I can't add anything to that. It was wonderful, Carol. Thank you.
So again, I think I'd like to thank our guests today, Carol and Arkie. You've been wonderful. Today we've talked about a critical healthcare problem in our state, and that's drunk driving. It causes far too many fatalities. I think we should aspire to a vision and a future with no fatalities in the state of Hawaii. We have the will, I believe, to take care of much of the problem. We now have technology emerging. I say if you have a loved one in your family that's got an alcohol problem, reach out to MAD. Find a way to get this device, the interlock device, into the cars that you guys have at your home. Find a way to make it almost impossible to drink and drive, because you'll save the life of a teen on the road, you'll save the life of a child on the road, like we saw a picture of that beautiful 1-year-old that died in Kailua Kona. And you also preserve your family and the integrity of your family, and you'll keep that heart in your chest, because there's no recovering from these accidents. Far too many people die in tragic car crashes every year because of alcohol. As an ER physician, I see it every year. So thank you for joining us today. This has been Healthcare in Hawaii.
Can I share our for the people who want to help, either with volunteering or making donations, our phone number is 532-6232.
And Carol's going to say that number one more time. This is a ribbon that we'd like you to put on your car. This is during the holiday season, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, every single holiday, there are increased numbers of accidents on the road, and they're even more tragic than the other times of the year. But please, be smart, be responsible, don't drink and drive. Engage MAD in a way that's practical, help them lead the way to a time when we have no drunk driving fatalities in our incredible state of Hawaii. Thanks for joining us. I'm Josh Green with Healthcare in Hawaii.